class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today will be the first of many videos for Sharks Players Year in Review. So basically, I will be reviewing every single Sharks player, or at least the most relevant ones who actually played a good handful of games during this past regular season and playoffs. And first up, since we are going by jersey numbers, is number 4, Brenden Dillon. His frequent pairings during the season, during the regular season, I should say, were him with Karlsson and him with Justin Braun. That took just about 80% of the time he was on at even strength. During the playoffs, it was much more frequently with Karlsson, but also some time spent with Justin Braun, considering that Joakim Ryan rode the bench a lot, meaning they were juggling 5 defensemen. Besides his most usual pairing, which was with Karlsson during the playoffs, he ended up with Justin Braun a lot. Now, during the regular season, he had 82 games played with a goal and 21 assists for 22 points. Actually, not terrible for Brenden Dillon. He's definitely more of a stay-at-home defenseman. Also, certainly benefited from playing with someone like Erik Karlsson. You pass the puck to Erik Karlsson, he maybe makes some sort of crazy pass to somebody else who scores, or takes a shot and it's tipped in and it goes into the net. That's all of a sudden just a secondary assist for Brenden Dillon. So it obviously helped to have Erik Karlsson playing with him to rack up a few extra points here or there. But still, credit goes to Brenden Dillon for 22 points during the season. A plus 19 was a huge number for him as well, showing some defensive prowess and some defensive improvements for him. Even if plus minus isn't that fantastic of a stat, it's still being plus 19, the highest plus minus on your team, is still quite strong. His penalty minutes, not terrible at 61 penalty minutes. That would be with a misconduct as well as a fighting major, meaning he actually only had 46 penalty minutes if you take it like that, which is 23 minors. Not completely terrible, just about a minor every 4th game. And so as such, for a player who likes to play with a bit of an edge, which is something that you don't want to really take away from Brenden Dillon, certainly manageable. Onto the time on ice, 17 minutes and 45 seconds, pretty good for someone like Brenden Dillon. What's most interesting about that time on ice is the majority of that is actually at even strength. So considering the fact that the Sharks' top 4 this past regular season was Karlsson, Braun, Vlasic, and Burns, who played the majority of the shorthanded time on ice, Brenden Dillon only had just over a minute of shorthanded time on ice, which was 45 seconds lower than the next closest, which was Erik Karlsson, who was pretty close to 2 minutes, and was actually less than half of what both Justin Braun and Marc-Edouard Vlasic were getting in terms of shorthanded ice time, and only a few seconds more than Radim Shemek. So now with Justin Braun gone and traded to the Philadelphia Flyers, it'll be interesting to see if either Brenden Dillon steps in to that vacated role of the top 4 for shorthanded ice time, or if it will be Radim Shemek. Now, in the playoffs, Brenden Dillon played every single game as well, 20 of them, with 0 goals, 2 assists, and 2 points. So a massive step back offensively. Now, again, that could be related to the fact that Erik Karlsson was somewhat injured during those playoffs, and so maybe there wasn't as much of an offensive spark with Karlsson and Dillon on the ice. However, Karlsson still put up a very respectable amount of points, and so it just seemed as though Dillon was less involved in the play. And if you were to take how many points in the playoffs he probably should have gotten compared to his pace during the regular season, it should have been around 5 or 6 points. Only putting up 2, and both of those being 2 assists, is somewhat of a disappointing playoffs points wise. Also, plus minus wise, as he goes from the plus 19 team high that he was in the regular season to a pretty disappointing minus 8. And again, you can attribute it some of that to the fact that Erik Karlsson struggled defensively during the playoffs because of his injury, but still not the best look to have fallen that far from grace. Also, the fact with just 24 penalty minutes, no majors, no game misconducts and any of that. So that is 12 minor penalties over just 20 games. If you were to take the pace that he was at during the regular season, as I said, he put up 23 minors, you would have expected just about 6 minors during the playoffs, meaning for every minor he got in the playoffs, or he should have gotten in the playoffs, he basically got an extra 1, which is even more, maybe I shouldn't use the word impressive, but I guess maybe, disappointing to see, considering the fact that in the playoffs, there's a lot less penalties called. And so if you get, 2 penalties in the regular season, you'd probably only expect maybe 1 of those to actually be called during the playoffs. So the fact that he ends up with 12 minors in just 20 games, meaning he was really crossing the line way too often and maybe found himself out of position way too often. For time on ice, ice. Another disappointing stat to see in the playoffs, 16 minutes and 27 seconds, over a minute less than what he had in the regular season. And you might be wondering, oh, well, that's just, Brent Burns taking on more ice time, as you'd expect your best defenseman to play more minutes. But you also have to take into account that Erik Karlsson couldn't play too many minutes, and the fact that in the playoffs, since it's a smaller sample size, games that go to overtime actually have a big effect on time on ice. The fact that the Sharks played games that were close to even 90 minutes in length should be, increasing the ice time that Brenden Dillon would have. Also take into account the fact that the Sharks were basically running 5 defensemen for the entirety of the playoffs, with Joakim Ryan mostly sitting on the bench for the whole time. So the fact that Dillon actually doesn't stay even in ice time, if not go up, but in fact goes down in ice time, shows that Peter DeBoer was certainly rather disappointed with Brenden Dillon's performance during the playoffs. Also, if you take a look at where the time on ice is spread out, you see he has the majority of it during the first series against the Golden Knights, and he actually has less than his average time on ice in the series against both the Avalanche and the Blues. So clearly DeBoer saw something wrong there. And so my grades for the year, for the first 3 quarters, very impressive for Dillon, B-, B+, A-, looked much improved, looked like a very consistent defender for the Sharks. The fourth quarter wasn't great for him, but still not that bad, C+, but the playoffs just extremely disappointing, ends up with one of the lowest grades on the team for the playoffs with a D. And as such, in a year that had so much promise for Brenden Dillon, started off with so much promise through the first 60 or so games, he actually just ends up with the final grade of very mediocre C. Class dismissed.